So, fellow Hoosier, hard not to pay attention to what's going on the football side. It'll be interesting to see where the team is at when this episode is released. But as of this recording, 10-0, was watching. I got home last night, and I assume it was ESPN. Whatever was on, one of my daughters sitting there watching it, and they're talking about the latest rankings, and based on that, where the chips would fall today for the college football playoffs. And they're showing, how the seedings would be and kind of who the would match up and whatnot. And just, again, I'm super excited because I started buying football tickets the day I graduated in 1995. So we had decades of interesting football,
good tailgates.
Lack thereof. Of good tailgates.
Yeah, I mean, the tailgates were amazing. I was a freshman in 2011. The football tickets were $5 for the season,
right.
And then after that, they just came with the basketball tickets. You couldn't even get them separately.
Yeah.
So.
And if you went in, you might have been in for the first half,
and
then
you left,
and that was it.
Hardly anyone was there. So to see 10-0, the first time in program history, and be a real, football school, it's pretty incredible.
For sure.
And this game against Ohio State next weekend, and then also very excited for the bucket game.
Yeah. The last two home games, so it was Washington. Was it Washington?
Washington and Michigan.
Washington and Michigan. Sellouts, like legit sellouts. And just the buzz. It felt different. It felt awesome. It was like the way it should be.
Exactly.
And, you've been around there for a long enough time, like you just never felt it. And to go in the stadium, see it packed with, cream and crimson for the most part. And it wasn't Ohio State fans. It was all mostly IU fans. And in the fourth quarter, the majority are still there. It's like, holy crap, where are we?
I need to get down there and go see a game. And also to beat Michigan State in Michigan State. Never thought I'd see that day.
Right. Come down to the bucket game. Stop by our tailgate. Just find tickets. Come to the game. Should be a good time. Last I checked, they've not announced the game time yet, but they're predicting it's either a 3:30 or 7:30 game.
I kind of hope it's 3:30.
I'm hoping for 3.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it not being noon, but 3:30 would be good because 7:30 that could be
That's
chilly.
my bedtime, man.
Well,
Right, a late drive home.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say that the 10-0 was cool. The finally beating of Michigan and all the things. Where I place the pinnacle that we have reached as an IU football fan is based on, take all the social media like keyboard warriors, all the sports talk radio, the TV folks, and we have officially become the villain. We are the villain right now of the CFP, and that's amazing. I never thought that I'd want to be that so bad, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, so on that show last night, a lot of the talk was half of them are kind of giving IU credit. The other half are saying, but they still haven't played anyone. This will be their first real test. And the debate was like, okay, we can't control what happened to Washington and Michigan after last year. But we played the two teams that were in the national championship last year, and we've beaten them both. I get they're not the same team as they were last year, but that seemed to be the real emphasis of the debate. And IU was getting a lot of that talk because should they be there? Should they not be there? If they lose to Ohio State, are they in? Are they not in? And then the question was, I think most of them feel like they're going to be in unless they just get thundered, and then it kind of opens up for debate. But
that'll be really
just seeing them
to
in
see.
there, and then also seeing that potentially they could host a first round game. That would be crazy.
That would be amazing, and I have already purchased my tickets.
There you
Pre-sale.
go.
I'm like, please, let this come through.
Here's what would be interesting. One of the predictions showed us hosting, and hosting University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. Middle of December. I mean, it could be 15 degrees in Bloomington for a Southern SEC team to come up.
Yeah,
maybe that's good.
Advantage IU.
I would think.
Yeah, I would take 15 pouring snow. Don't really do that much in Bloomington, really anywhere, other than Northern Indiana anymore. But I take it.
Yeah.
Based on it being 65 yesterday, it may still be pretty nice in December.
It's possible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so your challenge is make it to the bucket game. We'll have a cold beer, or fireball shots, or whatever waiting for you. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're tuning into the Assessa YouTube channel, thank you for doing so. While you're there, if you haven't already done so, hit the little subscribe button and that notification bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes like this one drop. We would greatly appreciate it, regardless of what college football team you're rooting for. All right, today, new guest, Mr. Lance Evinger. Did I pronounce that properly?
You did.
Okay, perfect. Hendricks Commercial Properties. Company making a lot of waves in Indy the last few years and going forward, also having to be our landlord. So thank you guys for putting us up. Lance, welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Why don't you do us a favor and just kind of give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. So I've been with Hendricks for the past 10 years, graduated from IU. I'm a Hoosier native, moved up to Wisconsin, where actually I had spent 10 years earlier in my life. But with Hendricks, I started as a financial analyst, then I got into leasing, acquisitions, and now getting into development. So it's been a whole PhD in commercial real estate with them, and it's an absolute great group to work for.
What was your major at IU?
Economics. So completely unrelated.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
Little co-ask school guy.
Supply and demand, all that stuff, it still applies.
Well, it's funny. I've been out way longer than you have, but if you go out, 10, 30 years and you start talking to your friends that you all went to IU with and ask, or look at them, what business are they in now versus what they majored in, I would say greater than 50% typically end up doing something completely different.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it happens. It's all good.
Unless you're an engineer or mathmatician or something, right?
True, yes.
Then you go to Purdue.
Right, you're not even at IU.
Right, yeah. So what did you go straight to Hendricks after graduating?
I did, yeah.
Okay, what kind of drove you there?
So I guess when I was in high school and early into college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I thought about medicine, but then I was terrible at science. That didn't work. And then I thought investment banking would be the way to go. But then when I saw what that was and, the hours, I was like, I don't want to live under a desk. That didn't. So real estate was interesting. And I'd grown up around it. Both my parents have been in real estate for a long time.
Okay.
So, it seemed like every family trip we took was, some real estate kind of a trip, a master class and site selection and all that kind of stuff. So I was convinced to do an internship, and I ended up liking it because it had the business fun that I was looking for, but also a little more laid back, pretty cool people. So I started applying to different companies and actually got a job with a group out of Phoenix, and I was going to take that. And then I got a call back from Rob, who's CEO of Hendricks, and he said, well, I'd really like you to come work here, and I'll give you a better opportunity than anyone else is going to give you. And that was an offer I couldn't refuse.
Sure,
so I moved up to Wisconsin, and they've continued to offer those opportunities over the past 10 years, so I've stayed.
Nice. Was your internship with Hendricks or with somebody else?
Yeah, it was with Hendricks.
With them, okay. And then you graduate in Bloomington, get the job with them, and you head to Beloit?
I head to Beloit, yeah.
Okay.
Lived there for 2 years.
2 years.
And then I moved to Madison. And I was in Madison 2.5 years.
Different school, but still a college
25,
town.
Oh, yeah,
living in Madison. Not bad.
It was college town, state capital, a lot of businesses there, a lot of young people. It was fun. Badger football was very good at that time, and hockey.
What's hockey?
Yeah.
I told my kids that's a fictional sport when they were growing up.
Not when you live in Wisconsin or Minnesota. That's
Right.
For sure.
everything.
Yeah. Well, Madison is a good town. Been there a couple of times. Going to a Badger football game is quite the experience. They have a lot of tradition. Hoosiers don't really quite have that yet. Maybe we need to start some new traditions this year, but we'll see.
It's time, I think.
Something to do with Signetti, but I don't know what that is.
Well, I think the best tradition we can establish at IU is just the tradition of winning football games.
Well, yeah.
Which I feel like we're laying the foundation pretty strongly right now.
Let's hope so. All right. So let me ask you this. When you did your internship, what were you already attracted to commercial real estate at that point in time, or was it still something that you're kind of getting your feet wet into?
I just didn't know much about it. And really my internship was more in construction and property management. So I was coming down here sometimes. It's when we were building ironworks, the first phase of the apartment. So I was going and sometimes working out of that construction trailer and walking through all the units and seeing how far along they were and talking with contractors about whatever they were installing that day or week, and going to meetings between the Ruth's Chris contractor and our contractor, and listening to those arguments of who did what wrong and all that kind of stuff. And then property management type things, which just meant they could send me anywhere into a lot of old buildings that were falling apart or probably hazardous or dangerous in some way to go into, but just which was fun. It was sort of adventurous, but they could just ask me to do anything. It was just the go for. The company was a lot smaller then too.
Sure.
They only had 30, 35 employees versus today on the real estate side there's at least 150, and then we've since founded this whole hospitality company that has thousands of employees.
Nice.
And that's Geronimo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you touch on that just for a moment? Because
Sure.
I'm not fully aware of what all that entails.
So Geronimo now operates 7 hotels. They have a country club, a fitness club, a minor league baseball stadium, at least like 30 different restaurant concepts. And that all started with one restaurant and one hotel in Beloit, and then we did another one and another one and another one, and expanded that to Indianapolis and Boise now. And we have a hotel in California that is under construction. So it's growing, and hotels have been an outstanding business for us, the best.
Yeah. And so that's actually not just constructing a hotel or rehabbing an older one, but managing
It is
the
operating.
operations.
Yeah,
and all
they
that.
operate those businesses.
Okay.
Hendricks owns the real estate, but Geronimo operates the business.
Right. Okay. Cool. So let me ask you this, and we've already talked about this a little bit off air, but why Hendricks? What attracted you initially to them, and what today, after 10 plus years, keeps you really excited? I think I know the answers already, but I want to hear them from you.
Well, part of it is the family side, right,
Yeah.
and being able to work with my dad and my brother and see them all the time. But the other part is Diane, who's an amazing founder, and working for her, this company works very differently than other commercial real estate companies, than most of them. It's not publicly traded, and it's not, like a GP LP situation where we have a bunch of investors that we owe some return and we have to, buy something and flip it in 5 years. That's not the strategy at all. It's buy, build, and hold forever. There's no, we need to sell this. Now, we will sell things if opportunistically it makes sense, but, something like Bottle Works, Iron Works, what we've done in Boise, you don't sell that. That's for Diane's legacy, for her kids and her grandkids, and it's community building. It's building things right to a very high quality and not settling for less than the best in a lot of cases in terms of our leasing, merchandising, and that resonates with me. That's fun and interesting and fulfilling to work on. So, I was drawn to that, and I enjoy working under those conditions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And
I would say that, and I would say this even if you weren't sitting across the table from us, but everything I've read in the IBJ and elsewhere about Hendricks, and in our experience as being a tenant of Hendricks at your Indiana corporate headquarters, if you will, speaks to the culture that you just touched on. And your title is VP of Acquisitions and Dispositions, and I kind of looked at that and thought, but I don't think there's a whole lot of disposition or disposing of assets going on, because of the approach that you guys take of not just looking at it purely from, hey, here's an asset, we have an investment, and there's and the way it affects the balance sheet and the net worth of the business, but the desire that Hendricks has to build something in a community that is meaningful for the community. I mean, the way you took Ironworks, which was new construction, but it doesn't look like, hey, this was a building that was thrown up 10 years ago, and it's this odd mix use of contemporary, modern, and just doesn't quite fit the place.
Right.
Or you go to Bottle Works, which was even a much better example of taking something that already existed, that was very old, and trying to maintain the character of that as much as possible, as well as any new addition to that property that fits.
Right. Well, so Hendricks has gone through a lot of iterations in its philosophy. It's been very different in the Ken and Diane era to like the Rob era, and even within that, it's changed as well, because all these like legacy projects, like the ambition of an Ironworks, a Bottle Works, a Circle Center. I mean, Ironworks was just done in 2014. Rob took over in 2007. So that prior to Rob, it was all industrial. I mean, there was maybe a handful of retail here and there, and it was mostly in the state line area of Wisconsin, Illinois. But they had real estate in all 50 states because they had all the ABC Supply locations.
Okay, yeah.
And a lot of just Class C industrial. And that was like what Diane told Rob when he took over was, I want real estate I can be proud of. And so we did a lot of dispositions of selling all of that industrial, which actually the past 10, 15 years has been a great time to do that, recycle all that capital and put it into these higher quality urban mixed use developments.
Was Ironworks the first development in central Indiana for
Yes,
Hendricks?
it was the first project in Indianapolis.
Gotcha.
I've never met Diane, but everything I've read about her and her late husband, some of their background, I would imagine that, and I don't know Rob, but that entrepreneurial spirit certainly flows through the company, and kind of the way you described it. To me, I think all three of us, that it's exciting, it's cool, it's fun. I like what you guys stand for and stand behind, in the fact that, to your point, you guys are going in and you have this methodology and this purpose behind what you're doing, and it's not just to do a quick job and flip it and cash out and go to the next one. And I think that's something that certainly we respect. And the projects that you guys are doing also, as Joe was pointing out, like those are ones that I think will stand the test of time as well. Bottleworks, to see the transformation there. I mean, it's a pretty large project. At least
12 acres,
not in that industry, but that's a pretty sizable project. And what you guys have done there that is already established, and the stuff that you're finishing up now, I mean, it flows well, it blends well with the city of Indianapolis.
So I'll just take a moment to, like, in 2010, 2011, when we started doing these retail developments, the first things we were doing were like Chipotle, Aspen Dental, like 2-tenant out parcel buildings, right? That's a lot of people do that when they get started.
Yeah.
And then we got into doing power centers and, like a Kohl's, Hobby Lobby type thing, or grocery anchored center. And it just, every time, we never did the same thing again. We never got into like, this is our thing. It's like we always tried to do something different every time and get bigger and bigger. And then we started doing the mixed use thing. We had just done our first apartment project in Beloit when we were doing Ironworks, because originally Ironworks was just going to be retail. And then we decided to do the mixed use and go vertical and add the apartments. Our first apartment project only had like 30 to 40 units, and Ironworks at 120. So it's bigger and bigger. And then after Ironworks,
Same thing,
Bottleworks,
there's more of them, right? No big deal.
I mean, it's just very quickly we were doing bigger and bigger projects.
Yeah.
And Bottleworks was the biggest thing we ever did, and a huge undertaking, and took us 4 years from beginning to opening the first phase, and we're still building buildings there today.
Right.
We have some under construction that'll open next year.
Yeah.
And then Circle Center on the horizon, which is even larger. 2 full city blocks of downtown, which, it took us 2 years to acquire that. But originally, when that was all put together, it took the city like 15, 20 years to get all those parcels together.
Yeah. So you guys are ahead of the game.
Yeah, I don't know what could be bigger than this. I can't even imagine.
Well, so you made a comment that when Ironworks was under construction in 2014,
yes,
at that time, Hendricks had 35 employees. And then now you said you're up to 130 to 150.
Yes.
From your point of view, as someone who interned in college at the company and has grown up with it and seen that growth, not just from an employment standpoint, but the way, the types of projects, the size of projects, from your perspective, how has, and of course going through some leadership change as well, how has the culture, despite any changes overall, how have you seen the culture able to maintain itself or grow and strengthen with the expansion of the size of the company?
Yeah, it's ebbed and flowed a little bit. There's highs and lows, like I think there is in any company. It's difficult, especially in periods of rapid growth, to maintain that culture. And I think it's definitely been tested when you go through a period of time of like every single day, it seems like there's someone new in the door. And when you get all those personalities together, not everyone's going to get along, and it does change. But when we have these big projects, especially, and we're tested as a company, whether that's financially or just the stress of putting these deals together, everyone does rally around that. And we do a lot of outings as an entire company. We do an annual meeting every year where we get together, and Rob and various people from all different departments participate in talking about what they're doing, how they're contributing, and getting back to that ultimate objective of, stimulating growth, building communities, creating jobs. And that brings everyone together. That maintains the culture, and it's kind of everyone that works there, like you believe that, you live that, and it unites us all and keeps us all going, even when we're tested in the more trying times.
Yeah, I say your business has it's a similar challenge that we have, where sometimes I wish we had one location and everyone worked under the same roof, but we don't. We've got 8 locations and people spread out, it seems like, all over. How does Hendricks, outside of having everyone come in for an annual meeting, how do you get that message, that vibe, to speak, young person speak, to permeate throughout the geographic distance?
It's very difficult. I think it's easier in Indianapolis because you've got my brother and I who were in Wisconsin for 5 years, and we're there for that, so many projects, and to be around those people and that culture for that time, to then come here, it's like we're the extension of that's here. We have like that connection and know everybody up there, where if you were hired in Indianapolis and that's all you maybe go up there a couple times a year, but it's pretty intimidating. There's 100 so employees up there that you don't know, that you don't really get a chance to meet or interact with. I know a lot of those people, so I think that gives me sort of an advantage and an insight to that culture, but I can also help be a resource to people in our Indianapolis office and explain things of, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and, reinforce and be a resource. Now, in Boise, we don't have any employees out there that have ever worked in Wisconsin, and I think it's a little more difficult for them, or being, on an island at a hotel in California. You're more distant. Like there's pieces of that culture that's there, but it's not the same as when you go to the main office. And what I tell everybody is, like, spend as much time there as you can. Even if you don't really have a reason to go up there, just go up there and work there. Be in some meetings in person with people, and it's amazing, what you'll get out of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. When we first met, you brought up Boise and the hotel that you guys were either just finishing up or had just finished up there. Why Boise? What prompted, you guys are in some other markets too? I mean, not just Beloit and Indianapolis, but what triggers you to go into other markets?
It's sometimes more of an art than a science, and it's just on feel. And this was like a suggestion of a bartender we had at the first restaurant that we opened, and she was the bartender there for a long time. Her name was Lisa. Every time I would go sit at the bar, she was the bartender, and just very charismatic lady. She had just come back from a trip to Boise and was telling Rob, I think one night, just, you got to go out there and check it out.
And this was in Wisconsin?
This was in Wisconsin. Okay. And so he went out there, comes back, and is like, we should really look at this market. It's like Denver 10 years ago at that time, small mountain town.
What year was this roughly?
This was like 2016, 2017.
So pre-pandemic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we made our first acquisitions there in 2017 and bought a number of buildings before Boise really blew up, because in 2020, and so
boom,
you had San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, everyone was moving to Boise, and it really blew up. Housing got really expensive. Commercial real estate got really expensive. And really all the acquisitions we ever did were, I think, between 2017 and 2019, we built the hotel on land we already owned. Now we're sort of priced out to buy
everything.
more. Yeah. So it's
awesome.
That was a well-timed market entry for us.
So you guys knew this pandemic was getting ready to happen.
No, I mean, sometimes you get lucky, man.
Right.
But we have plenty of other mistakes that we make too.
What's that line? I'd rather be lucky than skilled any day, or something like that.
Better than lucky than good.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I've since, after we first met, I did go back and look at that hotel. It flows well with a lot of the other properties you guys have, and just the look, the feel, very cool.
It's the best one yet.
Is it?
In my opinion.
Okay, nice. Well, sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't say yet.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you this: what completed project that you've been involved with so far are you most proud of?
So, Bottle Works, which we've already talked about, but my role in that project was leasing. So all the tenants that are there at Bottle Works were my relationships. I found those people, those business owners, and convinced them to open another location at that property, which we built something beautiful, but that leasing is what breathes the life into it and creates the vibrancy and everything. It's the character of the community there. So I'm very proud of that.
When you're looking to lease spaces in a property like that, are you looking more for locally owned, smaller brands, maybe its first location or an add-on location, or do you go after the larger national chains, or just it's just a hodgepodge.
I think it needs to be a
events.
mix of all those.
Yeah.
There's a right mix of, like, there may be a national that fits in, but we're not, Simon or something where we're doing a mall and it's the same lineup of national tenants every time.
Right,
That's
yeah.
not our business. But, so it'll be a mix of cool local, maybe some regional guys that are looking to expand from, a Columbus or Cincinnati or something.
yeah.
We were pretty successful with that at BottleWorks. It's just what do we think is cool? We do a lot of traveling. We take a lot of trips around the country and around the world to kind of get best practices, from a project planning, architecture standpoint, and leasing, merchandising, looking for cool new concepts, trade shows and things too, and just pick up a little piece here and there.
That's the kind of R&D I could get into.
Yeah.
Pretty
We're
fun
gonna
trying
travel
all the
around.
restaurants,
Right.
seeing if the
Yeah.
food's good. That's a big part of it. With
Yeah.
the food hall, that was a big part of it.
I got to go on another trip.
Well, that's what he said growing up. His parents were like, hey, kids, we're going on a family vacation. And really what they meant was we're just going to go scouting.
We're going to go to malls and walk
It was like
around.
our prior guest, Craig Hughes. We would go on family vacations, but my dad would just take us around to all these different restaurants to test them out. It's like, that's actually not that terrible.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. It's fun. I like it. It's a cool business.
So if I look back, like the evolution of commercial real estate on particularly the retail side, like the 70s and 80s, you had the big malls.
Mhm.
And I always think of like Chicago, where the scene of Back to the Future, like the big malls, or people would go
Yes.
there. That was their hangout spot. And then you kind of transitioned. There's a lot of strip malls that were all retail. And then they said, okay, how do we make use of these behemoth parking lots? We're not filling up. So they did outlot developments, which you mentioned the Aspen Dental and Chipotle or whatever, concepts that 2 or 3 block buildings.
Right.
And now, and I'll say now today, I mean, it goes back a handful of years now, but the phrase mixed use is a very popular way of describing exactly what that is: retail, commercial, residential. Do you see that continuation for a long period of time, or are you seeing any shifts in what the market or demand is looking for out there?
I see that staying for a long time. Think about before malls. What did people do for thousands of years in towns and cities? It was mixed use.
Yeah.
But it was authentic, right? You have a little bit of everything, but you have a main shopping street. You've got, residential areas. You've got your office. Sometimes that's more dense in the center, and then it kind of gets less dense as you go out. But that's just city planning. And I think it's authentic, and that's why people like it, because it feels natural. So I think that is here to stay. I mean, we'll see. There are places where, really high-end malls do well. And, people have come up with all sorts of entertainment-anchored centers and things. You're going to see a variety, but there is something very natural and authentic about a mixed-use development with, like, a Main Street shopping street. And you can't do it everywhere. That's the one thing. Like, you can only do so many of these things. It's like over-malling, right? How many malls are there around Indianapolis? Like 6 to 8 that all have the same stores. That's probably too much.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put retail everywhere. But if you have the right location and you do it, it will be successful.
Yeah, I kind of say that starting with the automobile and then the development of the suburbs for multiple decades killed the pre-automobile, pre-suburb, urban, as you said, mixed-use development where you could live and walk from your home to the grocery store that was on almost every corner, to the pharmacy that was on every corner, to whatever you needed, and walk back. The neighborhood we live in, we can still do that. And there was certainly a period of decline where you had, every certain streets, you could go every 1 or 2 blocks, and on the 4 corners of an intersection were the old buildings from the turn of the century into the 1920s that had those types of businesses. And then there was a period of decline, particularly in the 80s and to some degree the 90s, because people would drive by them, but they were going from downtown to the suburb back to downtown. So it is cool to see that, almost like as humans, we've learned from our mistakes and we're kind of getting back into this. How do we create all we need in one stop, preferably by walking or a short commute?
I like it way better. I mean, you guys have probably been to Texas and seen how spread out that is, and you need a car, and everywhere you're trying to go, it's like 30 minutes to an hour drive. Like, it's so spread out. It's crazy, and it feels very weird to me.
Yeah.
I've been studying the history of transportation in Indianapolis, just sort of surrounding the mall, because you've got Union Station there, that's the Amtrak and the Greyhound, and the city buses, and sort of why are these streets downtown so wide? And there was this building called the Traction Terminal Building that was like the hub for all of the streetcars, the trolleys. And Indianapolis in 1907 had the busiest like intra-city trolley station in the country. They had like 7 million riders a year. And everybody, I mean, in downtown, like you could get from your neighborhood downtown by a trolley. They connected all of the neighborhoods around downtown, and that went away in the 1950s, and everything became cars, and then you had all the highways that went in to all the suburbs, and then people left, and they went to these suburbs, and it killed all those downtown department stores. And that was, I mean, the impetus for the mall when Mayor Hudnut in the like late 60s, 70s, you saw that decline very quickly from, you know, the mid 50s when all those streetcars shut down, and then all of a sudden into the 60s and 70s, you have all the department stores closing, and now downtown is just offices. There's no restaurants, there's no entertainment. And he's like, well, you can't be a suburb of nothing. We have to have something downtown. And that's when they built the convention center in the early 70s and the Hoosier Dome, Market Square Arena. And then now it's like we're becoming this sports and convention city, and that's grown to now our convention center is like number 4 in the country or something. And we were a powerhouse with these big sports stadiums. But the mall was like, well, we need shopping and restaurants. And at the time in the 70s, the mall was the new thing. So they bought up, I mean, Mayor Hudnut and the city bought up all the land on those 2 blocks and had this idea for the mall. Now, it took them probably too long, because it wasn't until the late 80s that they got all that land, tore down all the buildings before they had financing for the mall. And then when Mayor Goldsmith came in, he's like, we're not putting any more money into this project. Those holes stayed in the ground for a couple of years until they kind of passed the hat to the 14 largest businesses in town to get the mall financed. And that's why that ownership group that we bought it from was that same consortium of 14 owners from the original funding of the mall. And initially it was successful. I mean, they had Nordstrom and Parisian. It was actually going to be like L.S. Ayres and William Block or L. Strauss, like some old local department stores. But those went under or were acquired before the mall opened. So when Mel Simon and Associates took over, before that was Simon Properties, they got Nordstrom, Parisian, and then all the other like Class A lineup of retailers in the mall. But it was too late. It didn't open until 95. So you had, 5 years or so that were good. But then, I mean, Simon was only a manager of that mall. They didn't own it. They owned Keystone, the fashion mall. They owned some of these other malls, Castleton. And after a while, it became, well, we need to protect those malls. And this one really declined, and it's been declining for a long time. It's way overdue for a revamp. So finally, we were sort of enticed to convince the ownership group to sell to us, which took a couple of years to be successful with that sales pitch, but we were.
Well, imagine having to go to 14 different stakeholders and try to create a message that all bought into, and a deal that certainly is it was probably like riding a pretty significant roller coaster.
Luckily, that wasn't my job. That was their attorney's job, or their lead attorney's job, and then I was talking with the lead investor. And I convinced him, and then it was his job with his attorney to go convince the other 14 parties and their counsel that this was the right thing to do. And that's part of the reason why it took 2 years.
Yeah. Pretty much answering the last question I had, which was, what are you working on now that you're most interested in? And I think Circle Center is probably fairly safe answer on that one.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Everyone in the city is really interested in it. It's, I think, the best located real estate that we've ever had under our control.
Yeah.
So there's some pretty cool things we can do. And along with like what the city's doing, redoing Georgia Street, and Herb Simon with the Shinola Hotel and the other things he's doing around Gainbridge, and then the city and with the Signia Hotel and expanding the convention center, as well as the Intercontinental Hotel that's opening. There's a lot of cool projects.
Right.
Gershman Partners redoing City Market and doing some residential around there, which is much needed downtown.
For sure.
We need that population base to go up.
Yeah.
Well, you touched on that, because I was going to say, I don't mean to sound like a stupid question or a leading question, but obviously in the last 20 years, the amount of residential construction that's occurred in the, whether it be in the CIB or expanded beyond that, get out to Mass Ave, and maybe call it, within 2 miles of the center of the city, is nothing like it was prior to that. I mean, the amount of residential construction, whether it be apartments, condos, even to some degree homes, has created at least a really good start for population density to support the businesses, whether it be department stores or restaurants, any sort of retail. the Circle Center Mall development that you guys are in the process, so the early stages of getting going, will be mixed use and have a decent amount of residential. Is that correct?
Yeah, and similar to Bottleworks, I think it will have a greater halo effect around it. Like Bottleworks, we haven't built any residential yet, right? But because of that project, or at least partially because of that, you've seen the revitalization of the neighborhoods around it and increased density. So many houses have been flipped, and then a bunch of apartments have been built. Circle Center, much the same thing. Our first phase, I don't think will have any residential. It might. We haven't figured that out yet. And we'll have some that we bring, but I really think the greater halo effect will be around it in like office building conversions to residential and infill sites getting filled with more dense residential.
And phase one, correct me if I'm wrong, is the portion on the, let's say, south end, or that butts up to Georgia Street?
Yes, that's what we're targeting. Some amalgamation of that block.
Yeah. Guesstimated timeline?
I mean, I'd like to start demolition towards the end of next year, if not beginning of 26.
Okay.
Probably no later than Q2 of 26 to stay on track to open a phase in 2028. That's what we'd like to do. And that's about the same timeline Bottleworks took, 4 years.
Yeah.
But this is more complicated because we have existing tenants that we need to work around.
So you made a comment about conversion of some downtown office space to residential. If anyone goes and looks at open office space for lease right now, there's a lot of Class A space available in some of the, I'll call it high rises. I know my big city friends would laugh at me for saying high rise in Indianapolis, but do you see that as being one of the fixes for the amount of open space for lease in some of these big buildings?
In some situations, there's just challenges. There's only certain buildings it works for. You need a center core building with the sufficient floor-to-floor height to add in all the plumbing and HVAC and things. Plus, it's also very expensive to begin with, so you need a very low basis in the building, which a lot of these guys don't have. I mean, we have buildings downtown that this could make sense for, but our basis in the building is too high. So you couldn't invest that money and get a good return out of it. So there's challenges, but if there's a distressed asset that you could pick up for a low enough price and then get either some incentives or, your pro forma works, you're better at building apartments than we are, which isn't too hard. It can be done. Keystone did it at the building at, I think that's 220 Meridian downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And Gershman is planning to do it with the Gold Building and around City Market. And there's a few other ones. I think, I forget all the different developers, but there's a couple other ones that have been announced or in progress. So I think that'll continue to happen, but it's just not every building's going to work. Like the old industrial buildings work well for it, right? There's already been, Mill 9 and Real Silk Lofts on Mass Ave. Those were done in like the 80s. But that really high floor-to-floor, really solid building, prime for conversion. Or, a more modern office building, but one that has those characteristics that you need to convert it. So it can be done, but it's not going to be a solution for everything, especially those buildings with gigantic atriums in the middle. There's a number of those that's just too much dead space.
Exactly. As I say, wasted space.
Some of those may have to be demolished.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say that the couple of months that we've been in the Masala building have been good. We appreciate working with you guys on that. It's been a real treat, and certainly are happy with our digs there now, and are certainly more productive and enjoy going there. So thank you guys for the partnership there.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Well, thank you. Jury's still out. We'll see. We'll try not to screw anything up. Lance, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Thanks for sharing about yourself as well as Hendricks. And we wish you guys good luck on all the projects that you have going on here, both here in Indianapolis as well as nationwide. And
thank you so
continued
much.
Success.
Appreciate it.
And guys, thank you all for tuning in for this episode of the Industrious Podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us. And don't forget, if you're on the Assessa YouTube channel, hit that little subscribe button, the notification bell icon, so you can be notified when new episodes like this one drop. And don't forget, guys, be industrious.